I am joined by the amazing Allison O'Toole, Dan Price, Andre Owen, Fred Kennedy, Chip Zdarsky. Chip, thanks for coming.
What's up, folks? I'm your host, Konrad, on Wednesday Night Reviews, and today, this wonderful Sunday afternoon here in Canada, and over in the UK, it's Sunday evening, we are joined by Nick Goode. Nick, thanks for coming on the show.
Hey, thanks for having me again. It's great. Been looking forward to it.
Good. Glad to hear it, Nick. I've been looking forward to having you back on, and this time it is for the second issue of your Sussex series. So right now, I'm going to bring it up so people can see it. Live is the campaign on Kickstarter for Sussex issues 1 and 2. Now, this is the first time on my show I've run into this situation, Nick, where your campaign is done. There is no days to go. It's done.
Yeah.
So one, it's backed. So congratulations. 115
Thanks.
people backed it. But that leads me into the question for the folks at home, whether they're watching with us live now or sometime in the future. Why are we here? Interestingly, go for it.
So basically, this is the first time I've done it with Kickstarter where they've enabled like late pledges. So you can still back the project essentially. Like while we're making it, you can still go and grab a copy of it or whatever. And I've put up like a little timeline in our update so people know when things are available till, and they can at least, it's pretty transparent. But I also thought sometimes like when you're in the deep of the 30 days of Kickstarter and it's all crazy, sometimes you get very consumed by the promotion side of it. And so I was like, there are some podcasts that I kind of just wanted to put like after the campaign to be able to just sort of like talk about the book.
Good.
And that was kind of my thing, as I was kind of like, I can spread this promotion out a bit with like late pledges, but also just talk about the book as it is and be able to not say the same thing that I've been saying for about 30 days that caused me to have a serious lack of sleep.
No.
So that's kind of why we're here, just to talk about Sussex and comic books, you know.
Perfect. Well, I couldn't like that more. That is the bread and butter. That's what I love. And the fact that we can take a breath. There's no rush. The job is done. You have been successful. Again, congrats. I am more than happy for us to just kind of shoot the shit and talk about this book and whatever else you want to cover.
Sweet.
Yeah. So my first real question for you then, Nick, for the folks at home who've never seen your face, never heard your name, who is Nick Goode?
Oh God, it's an existential question. So I've been writing comics for 12 or 13 years now. It feels like so long that I've forgotten. So I've been writing comics for 12, 13 years, sort of bouncing between genres. I do a lot of genre bending, I've realized. And generally my stories always seem to have or are influenced in some way by some form of history. So I did a book a few years ago called The Red Wave, which was like a samurai Ronin Edo period book. I did like a post-apocalyptic sci-fi series, which was set in the future, but heavily influenced by his history and other little events. And Sussex is kind of the one where it's fully planted within World War II, but with a kind of spin on it where I essentially went through some like mental health issues once in like 2015, 2016, and then again last year actually. And Sussex kind of came about from this desire that I wanted to tell something in the period of time like World War II. I knew I had this interest and fascination, but I didn't really have a story. I didn't have a narrative. And when I was in this kind of depressed state in 2015-16, I visited a place called Bletchley Park, which is like the home of code breakers. So for anybody who's seen The Imitation Game, that's where it's set.
That's so cool.
It's awesome. It's a great place, and for me, like at that time, because I was in this depressed state, I was trying to get out of the house and kind of do things and stay active, and Bletchley was one of them that I'd kind of always meant to do, and eventually did kind of get there. And going around there in this sort of state of anxiety, depression, whatever was in my head, and reading stories about spies and code breakers and these people who were doing this extraordinary thing. In my head, I was just kind of like, well, how would that happen with somebody who had anxiety or depression? Like, how would it happen with somebody who just questions themselves all the time? And it kind of got me thinking, where I was like, anxiety and depression is not a new thing. Like it didn't just appear one day. And like, here it is. So it must have been a thing kind of people felt back then, but maybe they couldn't express or get help for or whatever. And that was kind of where the story started to form. So, so I think I'm, in terms of who I am as a writer, I'm kind of somebody who loves history. I'll always kind of pull on any kind of historical event that I can find, and sort of put my own spin, my emotional kind of current through it, and try and tie them together in some way. I think that's kind of my usual MO. So yeah, that's probably me as a writer.
Good. And I gotta say, one, congratulations on, even given it's hindsight, but even then, the fact that you wanted to get yourself out to get out of sort of what you were feeling then and get better. Congrats. That's huge to be able to understand that about yourself, and to try anything that'll do it. Appreciate you got out, and they do say a lot of the time, get outside, go exercise, do something. I think, to me, it's just disrupt your current pattern. And for you, if that was getting out of the house and going to Bletchley, that's amazing. Also, to get to go there and be in that place of history is just super cool. So I'm glad to hear it. And I think being there, at least I hope being there, getting to be in it and feel it, it feels like it impacted the book in a big way. Because one of the things that I love about the book is, with so few words, you get across a lot of emotions, even though you're not directly talking about something. The characters in your book, the way that they talk about the events that are going on, it's very much so, what are we doing right now? But it is the things in the minor dialogue, what is said, I find, that really lets the reader know what these guys are going through. And there's something powerful about that. So I guess I one, before I get ahead of myself, we are here to talk about Sussex. So, Nick, what is Sussex? And then we can get into all the fun questions.
Sure. So the thing that I'd been saying several times over the last 30 days was that Sussex is a psychological thriller that explores mental health through the lens of a spy in World War II. It's our log line on there. And essentially it follows a character called Archie. It is set in... there are 2 time periods, which will be apparent from literally the first page. But generally, it's the kind of main storyline takes place in 1944. And Archie is basically part of a Jedburgh team. So in the first issue, he's kind of preparing to go into France and to disrupt the German war machine. And then the second chapter is kind of the mission, it's the thing. And why I said it was told in 2 time frames is that there is a narration that runs throughout the whole book, which is Archie looking back on the time in the war and trying to piece together what happened, trying to piece together the trauma, trying to piece together at what point the anxiety and depression, the thing that he can't name or visualize or whatever, at what point it changed him. And alongside that, it's also how reliable he is. So it's kind of, we all look back on the past and can easily tweak our reaction to a moment, our understanding of a moment. We can kind of look back and change those things because it's based on us in the present. And for Archie, that's part of it. It's the questioning of yourself. It's the kind of, did that happen the way I think it did, or did it happen a different way? Did I see something differently? Whatever. And that's kind of what the story is.
Yeah, that is massive rumination. That's brutal. Rumination. I'm sure you're well aware of it, Nick. For those out there who aren't aware, rumination is basically when you keep thinking about the same thing, especially if it's a past action or something, which I imagine Archie's doing a lot of, and generally not good. It is considered definitely a symptom of anxiety, depression, both of those things. And it's not a good thing. I'm sure a lot of people out there who deal with mental health have done it, and if you find yourself doing it, try and disrupt that. It's not healthy. But yeah, I absolutely think in Sussex you've done such a good job at showcasing that. I have a specific question I want to ask, and I don't want to do spoilers. So I guess for the sake of the campaign, just to start, book 1 is done. You've sent it to me. I've read it. You're actively making book 2. So the fun question, Nick, given the campaign, which is again successful, and yet people can still go and back it and get it, which is super cool. Given it's been successful, has the production of book 2 started? I imagine the script was probably done, but the art itself and all that.
Yeah. So part of the reason we've ended up doing it this way is so we had finished chapter 1 back in 2023, like towards the end of 2023, that first chapter was locked. I think it was actually around the time that you and I chatted for the first time, because we were on the Kickstarter for Sussex chapter 1. So the book was finished pretty much during that period, or the first chapter was anyway. And that Kickstarter was unfortunately unsuccessful. And what I didn't realize at the time was that I was like about to just fall completely into another bout of anxiety and depression and just crumble for a year. So the book sort of like went a bit dormant from probably like November 2023 till probably like February 2024. And I was still going through everything, but I had enough energy just to at least talk to Alvaro about it. Alvaro is the artist. And
incredible artist.
And I sort of said to him, what do you want to do? Like, do you want to keep doing the book? Do you want to retry it on Kickstarter? What would you like to do? Because for him, it's kind of his first comic book. And for me, obviously, it's personal stories. We kind of both had like personal things we wanted to get out of it. And we just sort of said, well, let's take time. And, we finished the first chapter. I'd written most of the second chapter at that point. I just hadn't finished it. And so I said, okay, I'll finish chapter 2 at some point. I couldn't really give you a deadline because the things are going on. But when I do, I'll hit you up and we'll get to work. So that sort of turned into last year a bit, is the kind of figuring everything out of like, how does this fit? And then, probably around September, October, I think I'd locked the second chapter. I was like, I'm happy with it. Alvaro went away and started illustrating the second chapter. And in the meantime, around November, I actually went back to the first chapter and just read it as the comic book, which I hadn't done for about a year at that point.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And so one of the things that this period of time allowed was that having written the second issue, again, when I was going through a state of anxiety and depression, I realized just how central the Archie's narration is. And in the original version, so had you read this chapter in November 2023, it actually changed. None of the art changed, none of the like beats changed or whatever, but the narration really did change. So there are a couple of pages where I brought in the narration a bit more because I think what had happened was that I knew I was kind of gearing, like subconsciously I was going towards this anxiety, depression hole again. And I think writing the narration, which is kind of the most personal version of that book, it's like, that is very much my thoughts. I kind of didn't want to face it in a way. It was like facing that is terrifying because it could open up a can of worms. Which is probably a sign that you were like, things probably aren't too stable if like the comic book is going to set off the thing.
Exactly.
So coming through the back end of rounds of therapy last year and kind of getting better, I read this first chapter back and I was like, do you know what? Like the areas where the narration is strong and the areas where I've sort of subtracted the narration in favor of dialogue, it wasn't as strong. So I ended up cutting loads of dialogue and re-putting in narration, and the book suddenly had this different flow, like it had a different kind of current to it. And that kind of gave me a boost of confidence. It was kind of like, okay, I know what this book is now, like completely. I know how I feel about it. I know kind of where it's going. And so Alvaro is basically towards the back end of the art of chapter 2. So we are close to it being done. And then I've just got to letter it. And kind of the only art he's doing is that for the Kickstarter, we had a tier where you could basically be a custom character. So in the second chapter, there's a couple of French resistance operatives, and we had like 3 slots available. 2 of them have gone, and the campaign closed. So
yes,
so we've got 2 people in there who have backed the book, and they become French resistance. So
incredible.
Alvaro's kind of just got to do that and a couple of last minute tweaks. But at the moment, I put out an update the other day, just to sort of say this is our production timeline. Like we're full steam ahead from kind of this week coming, really. It shouldn't be. I'm hoping we can deliver it in July, and I don't really foresee any delays. So hopefully we can get both chapters done now.
That's incredible.
Thanks.
So yeah, absolutely. Like well earned on so many parts, but the fact that the book is nearly done, like the art's almost finished, and then it's just lettering, incredible, fantastic work, and I am certain people will be appreciative. And yeah, like I guess what I now I need to ask is, given your revisit of issue 1, your redoing of your altering of the dialogue in favor of my brain wants to say monologue. It's not the word. The internal dialogue.
Yeah.
I'm assuming, or maybe I'm wrong, but what was the impact that had on issue 2? Did that force you to change how you wrote issue 2 and what that focuses on?
I think it was actually the other way around. I think issue 2, so essentially the way it works is in 2015-16, I'd gone through this one round of anxiety, depression, and then wrote the first chapter of Sussex about a year later. And so that was kind of retrospective, looking back and kind of going, the person I was when I went through anxiety, like that specific patch, like I've always got anxiety. I'm a typical guy who worries about literally everything. But that specific patch of like anxiety and depression together, looking back on it, it's like some of the things I did or the choices I made or whatever feels like an out-of-body experience to an extent. You're sort of like, I don't, like, how did I get there? Like, how did I become that person that was doing that? And so the first chapter was written with that kind of in mind, of this sort of retrospective looking at it and kind of going like, how did I get there? Puzzling that all together and sort of writing Archie through that. And then when so that was like the whole thing, the whole way through as well. So from like 2017 to 2023, when the first chapter was done, I'd been on that model. Like I'd sort of been on that train. And then last year, writing the second chapter while I was in the middle of getting help, like while I was going through therapy and learning to try and not ruminate as much, which was a big problem.
Good.
Yeah, but sort of having that as I was writing it, one of the things they sort of try in CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, for anybody who doesn't know, it was to write down your like thoughts. So it's like at the point in which you're having an anxiety attack or you're feeling depressed, write down your thoughts. And it had never worked for me, because I don't know if it was the writer in me or what, but whenever I'd write it down, it would feel like more real, or I'd be more critical, or I'd be
okay.
like harsher to myself in a way. It was that kind of like counteractive of like, I'm not even good enough to write down my own thoughts, let alone like kind of go through this. So that quickly moved on from that kind of exercise. But during this second round, I was kind of aware that, you know, that doesn't work, but I'd never had an outlet like Archie as a character. So part of the reason this book isn't autobiographical is because I feel incredibly uncomfortable about writing just about me. So I sort of funneled it all through Archie, and last year being able to kind of go like, well, this is the position I'm in, and it's kind of the second time I've gone through something really big like this. So let's funnel it into Archie. Let's see what it looks like through his lens. Let's see how it kind of works. And so the second chapter had a bit more of the narration in it, kind of naturally, as I was kind of uncovering these things and being able to weave it into Archie's story. And like the main sort of plot in terms of Archie's mission stuff, none of that's changed. That's all stayed the same from literally inception, like 2017. But the narration and the stuff set in kind of like present day, that's the stuff that's shifted as I've gone through it again. So coming out of this second chapter, kind of finishing it and having put in more narration, that was where, looking at the first chapter, it sort of goes like, oh wow, this is actually quite light on that sort of device. And there are great points where I could pick it up. Like there are things that I can't say in chapter 2 because we've moved too far through Archie's journey. So I can say them now. And it was kind of stripping back dialogue to put that in there. And hopefully the 2 chapters sort of feel like that narration is just one long kind of stream of thought. Like it's kind of all kind of continuing.
Yeah. Well, so on that, on the narration, on rumination, actually, I want to ask you about the last 2 lines in the first book.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's too much spoiler territory, though.
I think it's fine. I think that like the lines should be fine. I think they're okay.
So the line is, and this is while Archie's being deployed into battle base. Well, his operation. He says to himself, I cannot tell you that I fear the future, and I cannot see the present, but I can relive the past. Which is major. All this guy's doing is ruminating. I wanted to ask you about, how did that line come about? Because it's very powerful, especially with regard to everything we've talked about so far. And as far as Archie goes, can you speak to sort of what it tells us about his position and the things he's going through?
Yeah, I think kind of like I was saying, like his narration is very much me. Like they're all kind of thoughts or like conversations I've had in my head in a way with myself. And they're sort of things that have all just sort of hit me at different points and have stuck with me in a way that's I think in a way my sort of natural instinct to want to ruminate means I want to dissect it and figure it out. But knowing that that's kind of the wrong decision, I kind of don't. So sometimes it's like I just sort of keep a hold of it, and in this case I've been able to put it to Archie and allow it to unfold through his story in a way. So I don't have to dissect it. I can kind of just put it through this lens and kind of be like, okay, cool, I can play with it. In terms of Archie's mindset, it's very much there's a specific thing that happens to him while he's in France. And it's the question of like, did I make the right decision or did I not? And because this is a guy who can't see anything other than the past, really, like he can't seem to get away from this past and what he had done. It's a case of like, as we're gearing up to that moment, is he being entirely truthful with himself? Because that's kind of like always one of the hardest things with, I feel like for me anyway, with mental health issues, is sort of being honest with yourself. If there is like a certain part of yourself that you don't like, or something you kind of disagree with now, but you've done in your past or something, I think it's really difficult to like challenge yourself, and it can feel quite uncomfortable to sort of say, oh, do you know what, like it's crazy that I felt that way, or that I did something, or whatever. And I think that's kind of what Archie is doing in terms of his state of mind. It is very much, he knows he's gearing up to this point, like as the one telling the story, he knows where it's going. It's almost like through the narration, he is looking for any reason to see it in a different way than what actually happened. So
it's interesting too, because many studies have been done, and no, I cannot quote them at the moment, but Google them and you'll find them, where we know for a fact that basically eyewitness testimony, so like our ability to say, yes, this is what I saw, and have that be accurate in the first place, is sketchy as hell. But even then, like there are within cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, there are methods used where by replaying a memory enough times, you can rewrite it. And that's often how a lot of things can happen for people that have gone through trauma, where it can be tweaked enough to no longer be harmful, and you can actually take time to analyze it. Which I imagine, knowing that and then reading this and getting the narration going, this is definitely a person reflecting on their life. It's a fascinating thing to look at psychologically. So you've like, the way that you've orchestrated this is extremely dense, but also like so eloquently done. Because I think we can really feel what Archie's going through. And yeah, I think it's fantastically executed.
Thanks. Yeah, it was definitely one of those things, and I'm in a way, I'm kind of glad, having that extra, like, as wrong as this sounds in some ways, I'm glad that I kind of went through something again last year, because it meant I could come back to the kind of creative table in terms of what I was doing. Like, I was working on Sussex, and I was working on a novel as well, and both of them are kind of dealing with things which are very sort of like personal to me, and things that I'm very passionate about. And going through something again, kind of coming back of it towards the end of last year, being able to look at these projects again and kind of realize what I wanted to do with them, why I wanted to do it in the first place, and being able to then tell that story has felt kind of like really energizing. It sort of felt a bit like, okay, stop questioning yourself, stop kind of going down those same rumination of like running through your past and trying to sort of figure things out, and like start just telling this story, start focusing on the thing you're passionate about, and kind of get through that. And I think that's kind of possibly in the favor of Sussex, especially because it's helped me to really refine it, where it's just felt more and more closer to the line. And it was one of those things where, like, writing it, I really wasn't at the time wasn't sort of scared of putting my mental health brain on the page. Like, I was sort of like, this just feels right. And then I was saying to somebody the other day that, like, as it got closer to being funded, like literally in the last 30 days, I suddenly got that panic where I was like, oh my God, like, people are going to read like what my head is like. People are going to read my brain and sort of like know these questions that I ask myself and stuff. And that started to feel a bit more scary, but the actual kind of like writing and putting it all down, that felt very like organic and natural in terms of like, it just, it sort of hit. So yeah, so I'm glad it works. I'm really glad.
Oh yeah. Like it's one of the things where, and again, I don't wish it upon you, but perhaps you're right. Perhaps going through what you did and struggling like you did, you learn from that, and you retain that feeling so that you could get that out. Because
Mm.
at least from what I'm getting out of Sussex, chapter 1, again, folks that are out there, it is completely done. I've read it. It is awesome. The review pages that are here on Kickstarter are wicked. And chapter 2, as Nick has said earlier, is nearly done. So jump in. I appreciate when you Google search Sussex Kickstarter, it'll say it's done. Just click the button. You're fine.
Yeah.
And again, I'm not glad that you struggled again in the last year, but like if that helped line everything up and make these two stories feel, like you said, like a single narrative piece, fabulous. And again, the things that you personally took out of it, I am sure, are far more valuable to you now than, when you think back positively on the last year and go, hey, this is where I was, this is how I got out of it, it's what I learned. Now, one thing I am curious about, because you mentioned you've gone through therapy, and again, by all means, if you want to say pass on this one, just say pass. No shame at all. I am so curious if this came up with your therapist and if your therapist read this. Because it seems like it would be an extremely poignant thing for them to do to get to know what you're going through.
It did come up in terms of me talking about it as an outlet, and I'm sort of, like, as pretentious as this might sound, I'm somebody who like puts such a importance on art, like in general. Like for me, it's kind of like all of my like close friends, my relationship, like all this stuff. It's sort of there is so much art in those friendships and in my relationship, and even like my family and stuff, that it feels like I kind of like owe it so much in a way, like just in general, like pop culture, whatever. It feels like these things have really kind of just like given me something.
Yeah.
And so like that came up in therapy, and in terms of it being the work as well, is that it kind of became the conversation of me sort of saying, look, like this thing gives me so much and I'm able to kind of like put it back into something. And it was through this kind of story talking about mental health. So that was there. In terms of showing it to her, I didn't. I did wonder about it, but I was like, oh, does it breach like a weird therapist sort of patient thing? But yeah, I mean, it definitely really helped to at least be aware of it and not like I think I'm somebody who just like I'm quite open about things. Like I will happily just talk about pretty much anything and
I would agree.
Put myself out there, but so I try not to like kind of hold things back. And I think especially in therapy, you've just got to sort of be honest about everything and be very upfront. So it did come up. It did, yeah.
Cool. Well, I'm glad it did, and like I said, I'm glad it helped. Then I guess the next chunk to sort of to move away from the therapy and mental health and all that, I wanted to ask about the operation, because like you said, you'd like to pull from historical events. There are specific operational names given. I did not personally Google them, but I imagine they probably did actually happen, if not were based on something. So what kind of research went into Sussex when it comes to the real people that would have conducted these operations, the types of operations that were done? Educate me, Nick. What's going down?
Yeah, so the research part of it was like fascinating. Like as I said, I kind of like love throwing myself into research, and I think Sussex is a fictional story, so I didn't want to sort of take a real operation and suggest that somebody within there had mental health issues or whatever, because it was kind of like that didn't feel authentic. So it was kind of like, if I can take all this research and my own kind of personal mental health issues and try and like meld them together. So I kind of when I first started it, I didn't think it would be about a spy.
Okay.
Traditionally, like spies are always like Cold War era stuff, and it kind of World War II was very much the start of that. with the special operations executive. So initially, I think it was kind of more just boots on the ground sort of guy. And then I went to the Imperial War Museum in London, and I went into their archives. And well, actually, first I went for a walk around it. And one of the things they had there was, it was like this like radio, which looks like a suitcase.
Oh, cool.
Which was like a special ops exec radio. And I was like, oh, that's really fun and cool. And I think anywhere I can, I'll try and get those like real world things slipped into the story.
Okay.
And so like that was kind of my first thing where I was like, oh, interesting. That's quite cool. And then went into their archives and pulled like research on the SOE. And like the first thing I sort of encountered was that so much of the stuff about the SOE was burned because it was kind of all spy stuff. So it was
I mean, you cover your tracks, and no one needs to know he did this stuff.
Yeah, I mean, nobody would have thought, like almost 100 years later, somebody was writing a book about, like mental health within the SOE.
Yeah.
That wasn't a thing. So, but they did have a handful of things. And the things I kind of found were like some things about the Jedburgh operations, and just a few other things in terms of items that spies could have at the time or whatever. And that was kind of where it started to form in my head, especially with the Jedburgh. Like once I learned about what a Jedburgh operation was, which was sort of more about disruption and sort of like sabotage.
Okay.
That sort of really seemed to gel with Archie as a character. Like I think at that point I sort of knew Archie a bit more.
Okay.
And I thought with the Jedburgh operation, there's probably a bit more room for things to kind of go on in your head, for things to kind of like be less reactive and a bit more kind of like the build up and the sort of like post the thing happening. And so I think that was probably the big thing. I think once I'd learned that really kind of informed, okay, this is going to be a spy story. It's going to be about a Jedburgh operation. And then it was just kind of researching, like what logically would be an operation and how would that fit into the narrative,
cool.
And like location wise and all that kind of stuff, and trying to kind of piece it together. And I've chosen like a very specific time frame as well, which I've taken a little bit of creative license with, in that I've sort of pitched that Archie's sort of shipped into France in June 44. So we're sort of just post D-Day, and sort of like the way I've done it is that obviously there's a lot of like push from the Allies to kind of get to France and sort of liberate it and all that stuff. But there are these smaller places where it's kind of a bit more of like a scrap. It's a bit more kind of like smaller knit. It's not like two battalions fighting it out. And that's kind of where Archie and his team can kind of go in. And it's more about, you know what, we need to disrupt this because it will help the rest. So it's kind of like, that was kind of my funnel in. So that's kind of me having a bit of creative license with it for it to fit the story. But
sure.
I've tried to do it as like authentically as I can as well. So yeah, as I said, because like history is such a big thing, I'm very kind of trying to be meticulous about the details, but also trying to kind of be like, okay, like this is fictional as well. So it's kind of like,
well, it's interesting too, because when I first approached the book, given the explosion of colors on the screen, or well, yeah, I read it on the screen. As well as just like the very, I guess, heavy personal dialogue that was going on, the internal dialogue there. When Archie started getting not recruited but briefed on his operation and what they were doing, and when I read what they were actually doing, I was like, oh, because I was expecting. I think my original expectation was like, this is going to be like James Bond. Whereas it's more like, I guess, Band of Brothers or something like that, where it's very, you've made it not gritty, but realistic.
Mhm.
And the fact that, like you said, what Archie's goal is disruption, not like, oh, we're gonna go fight a battalion. It's okay, how do we cripple supply lines and prevent soldiers from getting where they gotta go so that, the larger army can then push in and resecure France, or chunks of it at least.
Mm.
And that was just very interesting to me, that you got to play, especially hearing this, like that you got to play sort of war commander and figure out, okay, within my timeline, where were things, how are things currently set up, and what can I say happened without, becoming sci-fi or something. That's fascinating. How harsh were you on yourself when it came to, like, would this have happened? Could this have happened? Were there anything that made you be like, maybe we shouldn't do this type of thing because, a month after this in real life, these things happened, which would have prevented it? Like, was there anything like that where you had to stop yourself, or were you just sort of, let's make something fun?
There were things in terms of the best example is probably like the location of where Archie goes in France. I think kind of like the first thought is always like, oh, we'll just do it in Paris because it will look great, like visually. In terms of it being a comic, it will look visually striking to be able to do something mental health spy in Paris.
Yeah.
And then just sort of like piecing together, well, the push to get to Paris to liberate it is quite an action driven thing, like in terms of like ignoring the full historical detail. If it was a film or a show, it would be quite an action push. As you say, it's like Band of Brothers or whatever, where it's kind of, here's this thing, here's this thing, here's this. And it becomes more like the journey to Paris rather than Archie could be dropped in or whatever. And so then it kind of became about looking at the places that were liberated on the way to Paris or after Paris.
Okay.
Because there were still like some towns or like villages or whatever that were still being liberated even after Paris as the push was ongoing. And that kind of became the sort of thing where it was like, okay, I need to pick somewhere where it kind of fits within my narrative structure that I can play with it.
Yeah.
But still feel like it's historically like authentic and it still fits in that thing. And yeah, the James Bond of it all as well. Like, I think that was also kind of a big thing where it was kind of going into it. Especially like the fact that I'd been led onto the SOE by how cool some of the stuff was, like seeing that radio.
Exactly, right? Like all the gear and
like all that kind of stuff. And you're sort of like, oh, I just want to put all this in there because visually it'll just look really cool. And at some point, I think it was kind of like realizing that, you know what, like the book isn't about like, it's sort of the difference between like the simple way of me telling the story and then what the story is actually about. So like sort of like the easy way of saying Archie's dropped into France and it becomes a story about, the mission and all that stuff. That's kind of like what's happening. But the real story is the mental health thing. Like the real story is him uncovering what happened and whether he can kind of trust himself with it. And so that's where it started to be like, okay, that's probably less James Bond. Like that's probably less Fleming. And at times I think it, for me, like the inspiration came more from like Le Carré, like Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy,
yeah.
The Night Manager, that kind of thing, where it's a bit more like talking, a bit more kind of people behind the curtain, kind of like doing things and pushing the thing forward. And obviously like that's all set very much Cold War, but it was kind of taking like that ethos of it's not going to be guns blazing and it's not going to be this action ride and it isn't going to be about gadgets. And it's going to be more about sort of noticing the way people say things, the way people move or whatever. And that became a bit more of a, again, kind of like an authentic thing of just sort of challenging myself. If I felt like going down the territory of like, we need a gunfight here, it's kind of reminding myself, like, do you know what, you don't, like, that's not the reason that this book is happening. Like, it's not a World War II action story. It is a psychological thriller, and that kind of gives me the room to breathe with it, at least. So yeah, that was probably the bits where I was really challenging myself.
Well, you know what? I am so glad you did. We've had a comment. So 9 Realms Publishing popped in. One saying, hanging out, first time watcher. Thank you, 9 Realms. And then artwork is beautiful here. Yes, Alvaro absolutely aced the artwork on this book. It's so cool. Like, it just, the way it looks is fantastic. And yeah, like, I'm glad you took inspiration where you did, because it honestly, it would feel so out of place, I think, to have like a gunfight appear in this book. Maybe in the second one, given it more covers his operation, but even then, the action that happens very much should be like, it feels like it should be like a tense conversation with someone's got a gun on someone and they're sussing out information, figuring, what are you doing here? Who are you? Why are you, all that kind of story, as opposed to Black Hawk Down or something.
Yeah.
And it, like I said, you've executed this so well. So, important question, Nick. Yes, the book is successful. It is already rocking it, and 115 people are already in on this. But we need to get more people reading this book. We need to get more people backing the book, because you need to keep making comics, especially if they're going to be of this caliber. So, Nick, would you kindly walk us through the remaining tiers that people can have?
Yeah, of course. So there's a physical book, which is a tier called the Operation. So you get a copy of the physical and the digital with that. The featured tier is called the Jedburgh, and that comes with an art print. We had this wonderful guy called Tim Catherall who did an art print based off of sort of like the opening pages of Sussex, really, because there is like a romance story to Sussex. Again, I feel like everything I write seems to have a romantic storyline somewhere. And so, yeah, Tim did this wonderful art print. So we've got that as the Jedburgh. So you get the physical, you get digital, the art print, and you get a thank you in the book.
Love it.
And then I think the rest of the tiers are kind of just like all that are left anyway, are mostly all like the book or a couple of copies of the book. I think the one tier we've got, which sort of still comes with extras, because we've just closed one actually, but the one we've got left is called the Bletchley. And if you're a writer out there and you're working on any project, you can back the Bletchley and you'll get a copy of the book, the digital, and you'll get my editing services. So if you're writing something, I'll edit up to 5,000 words of your creative projects, and we can chat about it afterwards. We can run through notes, and generally it's quite a collaborative approach as well that I tend to do. It's, it's always kind of based on what you guys need in terms of the writer, and I kind of serve your story in a way. So that's kind of the one tier we've still got left, where there's still something extra besides the book that isn't an art print. And all the dates, I put like a timeline in our update section, which sort of tells you when each tier is closing. So I think the Jedburgh closes on the 22nd of April, I think it is, if I'm right. There should be like a timeline. Yeah. So
11 p.m. That's such a specific time.
It's because I was like, I'm going to go to bed, but I was like, I will leave it to the very last minute, and that's usually like 11 p.m. So I was like, it just makes it easier in my head. I don't know why, but yeah. So that's kind of also our production timeline as well, in a way, in terms of making the book. So the hope is that everything is done by July and we can ship it and kind of get it out there. But yeah, so that's kind of the campaign as it is. So yeah, we're in late pledges, and if people want to grab the book, they still can.
I love it. When it comes to the Kickstarter, did you have to ask them to do this, or is that just something you can do?
It's like a new feature. So I've done 2 Kickstarters before, and they didn't have late pledges on it. So I think it is a new feature that's hit in the last year or 6 months or whatever. And you sort of decide which tiers you want to keep up as late pledges, and you can sort of decide how long. And it's quite nice just because it kind of means while you're finishing the book or in production or whatever, people still have the chance to grab it, and to be able to pick it up at least.
Yeah.
And it not be kind of like I don't have a storefront or whatever. It kind of becomes a bit more of an easy way. So yeah.
Yeah, like Nine Realms has dropped a couple more comments for us. So one, I like the psychological thriller aspect,
Thanks.
100%. Combat of words is underrated. Totally agree. And it's a new feature now. Yeah, I have so many times, just for my own content purposes, being selfish, but also when it comes to all the folks that I get to have on the show, like yourself, Nick. When it comes to like how do people get the book, if I do an interview with someone and it's on like the third last day, I can try and shotgun out information, but hey, back this book, whoa, but how much effective can I really be? And for the fact that this feature now exists where like people can get the digital copy of this book all the way up until June, the 27th of June, almost up until July. That is fantastic. And now like if someone's like, oh my god, your book looks so good, but the campaign's over, you could be like, oh no, here, June 27th, go for it.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's killer. Like,
yeah, it's great. It's like such a handy feature, and like it was one of those ones that I think when you're building the campaign, you can tick what you want late pledges, but then by the time the campaign's coming to an end, I completely forgot about it. And then like the email to say like, oh, your late pledges are open. And I was like, oh yeah. And then it kind of becomes like well, how heavy do you promote it still? Do you just sort of keep it in the background, mention it here and there? And and I think that's kind of like the method I've gone for is like, here's a timeline, like we're making the book, and if people want to pick it up, they can still find it and they can still back it. So it is nice. Yeah,
that's so cool. Well, Nick, we've got 8 minutes to go, actually technically 7.5. One thing that we've covered is a great deal of your personal mental health struggles you've gone through, how it's impacted the book, how amazing the book is, and where people can get it. Again, folks, if you're out there, Sussex chapter 1 and 2 on Kickstarter, Google it, hit back this project, and get yourself a copy of the book. You'll be getting 2 books, so that the folks out there can get to know you a little bit in a fun way, because we've talked kind of a lot about heavy stuff here.
Yeah.
I figured I would ask. I believe I asked you this last time, but I'm wondering if it's changed. Often, folks who make comics also collect comics. Now, I haven't made any comics, but I definitely collect them all, as you can see. You've got some wonderful art on the background there on your walls. So, I guess for me, Nick, what I'm curious about is, what is something in your collection that you have that is maybe not the most rare, maybe not the most expensive, but a thing that makes you happy when you get to see it and get to go, I have this thing and it brings you joy. What is that thing, Nick?
That is a great question. I also don't know what I would have answered with last time. There's 2 things I can think of, actually. One is like really recent and the other is somewhat old. The recent thing is I went and did a Comic-Con called Thought Bubble. It's like sort of like a comics festival in Leeds.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's amazing. Like, love Thought Bubble. But the first year we went there, it's myself and a guy called Harry Hughes who illustrates my other books. And we'd gone as a table with the 2 of us. And it was kind of the first time where we'd done a festival of like that size. So it was really intimidating, and I had a lot of like imposter syndrome. But it was the same year that like the distillery books had launched, so it was literally just a couple of years ago. And my friend Luke Barnes, who gave me a copy of The Devil's Cut, which was like the first distillery book. And our table was like right next to where all the distillery signings were happening.
Oh, no way.
Yeah, so like in between us like trying to do the table, I was like nipping over to get it like signed by a bunch of people. And so that's sort of become like this treasured thing in a way of kind of like it both is very cool to have all these signatures and it being a book that I really love. Like, I thought The Devil's Cut was great, but also just the fact that it happened in that year. Like the first year we did Thought Bubble, the first year that like so it holds like a sentimental value kind of thing now. So yeah, so there's that. And then like the old thing is that it's actually a piece of art that I've got at my mum's place. I haven't brought it down here yet, but there's a band called Aaron West and the Roaring Twenties, and they played a gig in London in like 2018 or 2019 or something, and they had this really nice art print for the show, and it was one of those ones where you're like, I need that. So I just like loved it, and then I got the lead singer to sign it as well, so it sort of says to Nick in this crescent moon, and every time I see it, I am just kind of like, that's so cool. Like I love that. That's awesome. So yeah, so that'd kind of be the two things.
That is fantastic. Thank you for sharing those. I'm glad you got to go to Thought Bubble. That is wicked. There are other folks I've interviewed from here, Canada, that are going over to be in Thought Bubble, and I am so jazzed for them because that is such a cool thing. I appreciate for you it's more local, but I also imagine still it's a huge international thing. So like to get in is
wild.
Yeah, and then just to be next to the distillery folks and get to have them sign it, that's so cool. And then to be able to have a band that you very much enjoy, have the singer sign it and personalize it. Wicked. I love that stuff. It's my favorite stuff. Well, Nick, absolutely, I want to say thank you so much for taking the time to come on the show today for me, tonight for you. And I'm so happy to talk Sussex with you.
Thanks so much. Yeah, it's great, and it's nice to be able to like talk about it again as well. Now that kind of like both books are just about to like come out this year and everything now. So it's great. It's so good. Thanks for having me.
For sure. As like absolutely, Nick, anything you want to talk about in the future, please do reach out. Happy to have you. And for the folks out there in YouTube land, whether you're watching with us now live or sometime before the 27th of June 2025, go out, Google Sussex Chapter 1 and 2. You probably just Google Sussex Nick Goode, Goode. You will find it. Click back this project. Get yourself a copy of 2 books. They have incredible art, wonderful storytelling, and I can't recommend them enough. That being said, folks, absolutely thank you for tuning in. Nick, once again, thanks you for coming on, and we will see you next time.
Golden age to present, digest to oversize. Never miss new comic day, yeah, no surprise. So where's my no prize? Check the letter columns, can't find issue 2. Collector problems, cliffhangers.